It's good to be back in the hot seat, and I hope we've had a good Christmas break. We're now looking forward to what could be quite a welcome relief as we start the roadmap back to irreversible recovery and unlocking of the UK ecosystem, and what that means for the economy, what that means for the scientific community. I think we're going to have a number of interesting chai times as we come through this and out of this. I'd like to welcome today my panelists and my friend, Sam Fazeli. So this will be a one-on-one chai time in conversation with Sam. I'll let Sam tell you a bit more about his background, but Sam and I have known each other for around 10, 15 years, something like that, I guess, through the biotech ecosystem. We work together on a couple of companies, and we invest together. Sam is a senior analyst at Bloomberg, a pharmacologist by training, and has been in this sector as long as I can remember, looking at biotechs and pharma companies, analyzing them, feeding in data. Sam Fazeli, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you, Sunil. That explains all this hanging down here, which is, of course, you never get a very nice a camera angle when you do these things. So,
has it been that long though that we've known each other? It must be that kind of 10, 15 year mark, 20 years. I don't know.
Yes, it has. The reason I was pointing to my physical age, obviously, is because after so many years, things kind of start merging into each other, and you forget when you knew people. What I can tell you is it's not more than 22 years. Because that's how long I've been in the city.
How long you've been working, yeah. So mine is a few years less than that, but not much.
Yeah. And before that, as you rightly say, I was in a lab with pipettes and pipette tips and doing all kinds of stuff, mostly focused on neuroscience. With the last job being very close to the city, actually, at Guy's Hospital. So. We're already getting some comments on the chat.
Yeah, I can see Randeep's in there. 1998 in Yamura, he said he knows you from. So it's definitely, I think it's before I was born, actually. I was kidding. I'm a bit older. But did you move into the city straight after your sort of early career in science, or did you?
No. I got my PhD in '89, and then I carried on doing some postdocs. First in proper neuroscience in the brain, and the subject that I'm still avidly interested in, if that's the right phraseology, which is the synaptic basis of information storage, learning and memory. So something called long-term potentiation. And I worked with the man who at the time had actually described LTP, and that was Tim Bliss. And it was fantastic times, but then very quickly I realized at the time actually doing neuroscience in the brain is quite difficult. So given I was interested in synaptic plasticity, I thought maybe we could do this in the neuromuscular junction. So I moved to Frank Walsh's lab at Guy's Hospital, and some people might know Frank from pretty much the week I left to go to the city. Frank, I think, got the job at SmithKline Beecham. It was before the GlaxoSmithKline merger. And he became head of research there, and then went off to Wyeth in the US and became head of research there. So those were fantastic times, really enjoyed it. But then I saw the light and thought, it's easier to make money in the city. So there you go.
Look, I've been reading your articles that have been popping out through the pandemic. And that's why I thought you'd be a good person to chat to about what's really been going on in the vaccine, the therapeutics. I've got a lot of interesting questions of my own, but I am going to ask the panel, the people in the who are listening to this, to reach out with questions. I'll try and get through as many as I can, but please do, if you have something on your mind, or something you want to ask Sam, then please do put it in the chat and I'll ask the question. So, first of all, I'm going to, you've written a lot around the pandemic, and the article that really caught my eye is not the one that was very well read today, which we'll come back to, but was the article is really about Britain's role in the pandemic. And there's been a lot of negativity and press around how the government have handled and grappled with the situation. And but then you wrote an interesting article about actually, the UK has, maybe not done as badly as everyone kind of thinks. And this is just as the vaccines are rolling out that you wrote this. So maybe you could, what do you think, first of all, what do you think the British government and the UK government did badly in handling the pandemic? Where do you think they could have improved? And we obviously know a number of things where they have done very well. We will, and it's not just the vaccines, as you mentioned in your article, but what do you think we got wrong?
It's very easy for, I'm an analyst. My job is to sit at the side of the ring and commentate about people in it, punching the lights out of each other, right? Whether it be a company, whether it be an industry, whether it be a government. So that, just with that caveat in mind, and the humility that goes with that, we have to understand that we're not actually doing the job. So, and I don't want to take sides on any political angle here or not. And with hindsight, of course, you can say a lot of good things about what you would have done if you were in charge. A lot of those things put in place with the caveats. Obviously, I think the latest reopening was the one that was, the one in October time, was the one that I was a bit surprised at, and I'm sorry, it was September, October time, and I think a lot of countries though got into the happy zone of looking at that case chart that you can find on all kinds of websites now, where the cases were pretty much, in the summer, you could have thought to yourself, where is this pandemic? What happened, right? Hospitalizations were down, and everything was down.
Yep.
So, when you look at that chart, you go, well, why am I hampering my economy and making hell for people's lives? Whereas, of course, as the cases started rising, I'm pretty sure scientists were raising the alarm regularly, saying this is not looking good. We need to do something now. We know that they were talking about doing circuit breakers and not listened to. But I would like to take my hat off to the authorities now. I don't know who's in charge making these decisions. The current lockdown that the UK's got looks incredibly powerful, right? And it creates a problem to a degree in that it makes it hard for you to try and decipher what is an impact of the vaccination versus the lockdown that people are observing.
Yep.
I'm speaking to you right now from France, and I know right here that they didn't go for a full lockdown. They have a mix of things with regards to 6 people or more are not allowed to get together, and at 6 p.m. you have to go home. There's a curfew. So, but if you look at the cases, they're not going down. They're slightly rising. And of course, one of the things that we have to consider for France and Germany elsewhere in Europe is that the B117 variant, which is now pretty much beyond doubt shown to be more transmissible versus the original variants, versions of the virus. That was the one that was first found in the UK. That's become pretty much 60, 70%, depending on the countries you're looking at. And France has also got to deal with the P1 variant that was first described in Brazil. And that's the one, and of course, it's not a surprise because you've got Brazil and Portugal with lots of connections. I think Portugal is on the doorsteps of France. So it's not surprising that those variants are taking off.
I mean, on those variants, when they first appeared, I took a call actually with a neighbor of mine who's very involved in the whole genomic screening program in the UK. And I sort of posed him the question to say, look, kind of over the garden fence, are our vaccines going to be able to cope with the variants? And right back then, there was only one variant that we knew of, which was the UK variant. And the answer I got back is, we will cope fine with this variant, but this is a dry run for what's going to happen, and there's going to be more variants coming through it. And lo and behold, we did have a lot more. But the initial response I got back from some, from a very scientist very much in the know, a very well-known epidemiologist, is that our vaccines could cope. Now, with the new variants that we've seen, and you analyze a lot of this data, do you think the vaccines are going to cope with all the newer variants that are coming out? And has that been priced into the market?
Yeah, so I'm still waiting for Bloomberg to give me funding to open a lab at the offices so that I could do a little bit of experimentation on the side to keep myself happy. No, but there's plenty of data now, actually, Sunil, that helps us answer some of that question. We know Novavax was the one that gave us the best data, 96% efficacy in the UK trial versus the ancestral variant, compared to 86% versus B117. which is the so-called UK variant. So really, from the perspective of preventing mild, moderate disease, the B117 variant doesn't really seem to be a problem. And I'm going to keep referring them with those numbers because I don't like going geographical with these things, because you don't actually know where they came from. Now, the one that was
just so
first
happens that our screening capabilities and sequencing capabilities are so strong. It just that happens that we, understand.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure that we found
So just
more than
just for terminology, can you explain which variant is which number? So if we've referred to them in the next conversation, people know which one you're referring to.
Yeah, B117 is the one that was first found in the UK. B1351 is the one that was first found in South Africa, and P1 is the one that was first found in Brazil. They do all have another name, which is 501Y, V1, V2, V3. Now, the difference between the two in South Africa and Brazil, where they were first found, is that they have this one other mutation that the variant that was found in the UK doesn't. And that's in position 484 of the amino acid. That's right in the middle of the receptor binding domain, where a lot of antibodies attach in terms of neutralization. And that's why those two other variants are more problematic for vaccines and people who were previously infected, because it looks like that when you look at antibodies in people who've been vaccinated against those two variants, not the one that was first found in the UK, you get a diminishment of neutralization.
Yeah.
So your friend was absolutely right. It's the others that I think most people.
And they've come in more recently. And what's the and are any of the vaccines more effective against some of the newer mutations, or do you think they're all pretty much remoteness? What is the data showing so far? Is there anything that you've seen that could be interesting?
Yeah, so I'm going to answer that two ways. Number one is we have to dissect out what we mean by efficacious, because you know, do we care about whether we get rid of mild disease or not? If we don't care about mild disease and we care about severe, critical, and hospitalizations, it seems from the data that Johnson & Johnson's got the best data for the variants in South Africa. It seems that variant, or the ones that carry those mutations, can't get past the vaccine induced immunity to cause severe disease.
Is that data just, sorry.
You know, that data came out with their phase 3 data back in a couple of weeks ago. So 64% efficacy against moderate to severe. And then when you move to severe to critical, over 80%. And no severe cases, hospitalizations after that. Now, another piece of data that came out earlier this week from the lab of a well-known immunologist, Shane Crotty in the US, that he looked at the T cell repertoire. So I'm sure everyone on the call knows that you've got the antibody response and then you've got the cellular response. The T cell repertoire, but this is what I was amazed at, over 200 epitopes in the virus for CD4 T cells, over 500 epitopes for CD8 T cells. There's no way a virus can mutate all of those at the same time and actually still be any shape or form viable. So the probability, if these T cell responses are enough to prevent severe disease, the probability that our vaccines would prevent severe disease, even against the variants, seems quite high.
There was good data from the J&J. Is that because it's just the other manufacturers actually haven't conducted those trials on the newer variants, or and J&J have done because it's just the latest one to come through, or do you think there is data out there to show that, you know, the AZ or the other vaccines are actually do prevent severe disease? So I did note actually in the AZ trial that they said it should prevent severe disease, but then there was no patient data around it. Is it just because they didn't trial it for?
No, they did trial it in South Africa, and it came back with something like a 50-60% efficacy against, 75% efficacy against the ancestral variant. And then as soon as B1351 came into existence, suddenly that efficacy fell to 10%. So 10% is almost nothing, right? That efficacy is against mild to moderate disease. 2/3 of the cases that were recorded with the variant were mild. 1/3 were moderate. no severe cases were recorded in either the placebo arm or the vaccine arm. So we don't know. All these people who say, oh, we can't use the vaccine, the Astra vaccine is against the South Africa variant, the B1351. We don't know how well it prevents severe disease. And in the same people who did the study had a slide, a figure later on in their paper that looked at T cells. And I'm going to get the numbers wrong here, but out of 93 or so T cell epitopes in the spike of the variant, there were still over 85 that were unaffected as regards the Astra vaccine. So if T cells again are sufficient to help you prevent severe disease, the Astra vaccine should still prevent severe disease, but we don't have data.
Just to move on from the vaccines that we know about and the data that we see on the news on the AZ and the Pfizer, there are some other vaccines which no one really believed that they would work. I think the Sinovac, we've got the Burret serum vaccine, Sputnik 5. Do you think is there more data coming about these emerging market vaccines, and what do you think they're as efficacious as the vaccines developed by Pfizer and AZ and J&J?
There are two papers that were published, one on the Sinopharm showing a lower efficacy. I can't remember exactly what it was. Was it 50%? Was it 60%? And remember, that's a killed virus. And there are some theoretical arguments as to why that efficacy was low. And that's to do with the way they were killing the virus, which uses a chemical that appears to lock the so-called spike protein in a form that's not that great to prevent infection. And then there's the Sputnik V or Sputnik 5. Well, I mean, that's an adenovirus. That's a two-dose adenovirus vaccine. The first dose being similar to the adenovirus 26 from Johnson & Johnson. And that showed pretty good efficacy level, over 90%. Now, that was published. I haven't seen any more details of data. And that paper still left you with a few questions, which I have actually emailed them, but haven't heard back.
And anything on the Burret serum vaccine? I mean, this is the most widely produced vaccine and probably will be used against the largest population in a way of people. So I did see some data coming out this week actually to show that actually it was like 80% efficacious. Is that something that you've seen or recognized?
Yeah, no, so I've heard that, but I try and keep my enthusiasm in check until I see the paper published.
You want to see in the Lancet or something like that?
At least, well, it doesn't
a good peer-reviewed journal. No, but
but even in preprint, at least you can look at the numbers and start making calculations yourself.
I think there's some data coming out that could be quite interesting on the Burret serum, and I mean it's one of the largest manufacturers of vaccines in the globe. I think the largest. I think, and I read that they're producing 10 million vaccines for the UK this week or this month. Of the AZ vaccine. Yeah.
A little while ago, yeah.
So moving on from the vaccines and a little bit about what we talk about these mutations. We've seen that. I mean, I have to just bring this into the picture of the market a little bit. Is that around a year ago we saw a massive sell-off of the market around a year, maybe 10 months or something like that. I kind of saw it coming a little bit and did sell bits of the portfolio, but then before the vaccines were, and I was interviewing people on these ChaiTimes and lots of experts, and the vaccines back then, let's say, were a year off at the very minimum, and there was no sign that we could develop the vaccine as quickly as it has been done, and we'll talk about that sort of feat and how it's been done. But the markets roared back so far, so quickly, and I couldn't see the scientific evidence for the de-risking in a way from COVID. What's your opinion on why the markets rolled back so quickly that it didn't give people a chance to jump back in a way? And where did all that new money come from? Where was the scientific evidence as the market rolled back for the upticks in valuations? And we're at a different position now, but during that period, what were you thinking when you saw the markets roared and you see the science as much as anyone else would do?
So you're referring back to April time when we had our 30%. What was it exactly? 33% correction to the XBI from February 17th, 18th to March 16th. I've got the chart here. So that was a 33% correction.
So was that 6 weeks, did you say? 4 or 5 weeks?
Yeah, from about February the 18th to March the 16th. March 16th was the bottom, and February 18th was the top. So I think what often happens in these situations is that they become a self-fulfilling system. So the actual 33% drop, I don't think means that normal people thought that the world is going to be a third less valuable. Let's put it that way, right? In terms of their earning power, etc. What happens, as you know very well, is that machines are massively involved. Algorithms are involved in here. As soon as they see a stock or an index sell-off, as it triggers a particular number, then they get activated and they sell even more. So it creates a downward pressure that's beyond whether it makes logical sense or not. And we're kind of dealing with a bit of that now. We've got a 22% down from the peak of February, or was it January? Early February, right? 2nd or 3rd of February. We're now down 22% on the XBI. So these things create their own momentum to a degree, especially when you have a lot of ETFs where there are retail investors, ETF falls, index falls, ETF falls, retail investor sells, ETF has to sell, and it just becomes self-fulfilling. So they always overcorrect, just as we always get over excited. The point is, where do you call the bottom on these things? And honestly, when you look at the March numbers, it wasn't like there was a massive bounce immediately back up again. It took a while for people to get going.
But it was quick, though. It was very quick. I mean, you probably have the charts in front of you, but it seemed very fast, and I couldn't see how it wasn't being driven by the science or the vaccines or anything like that, because right back then there was still very much in the R&D phase. It just happened very quickly in a way, the vaccines.
Yeah, so I mean, if I can do this very quickly in the XBI. When you look at the chart. I could share it here even. I don't know if I can. It doesn't matter.
No, it doesn't matter. I just thought it bounced back quickly, and the science hadn't really caught up with the markets in a way. And then I think now the science is, very much, is out in the public domain, and we can talk about what the amazing. In fact, let's do that now, because I read your article about how you thought that Britain had, and where you thought it was really excelling, which is why I really wanted to spend a lot of time. Where do you think Britain has really shone light on our capabilities in support of the pandemic? So you've touched it onto in your article around the genomics and the vaccines, but maybe you can touch on those 2 points and others where you think Britain has done well.
Yeah, so I mean, look, when I saw the first publication or news on the Astra vaccine, my immediate reaction was, oh, that's great. And then you start reading in it and you go, this is back in November time, I think. What's wrong? Why is it like this? So I was pretty critical, and to a point, maybe a bit too critical at the time. But the trial.
I read that actually. If anybody wants to read Sam's articles, by the way, they're very enjoyable. I spent a whole half day reading them yesterday. If you Google Bloomberg and Sam Fazeli, you'll see a list of all his recent articles. But yeah, sorry, go on, Sam.
So when you looked at that trial, you thought this wasn't like the best designed trial in the world, right? It had too many arms and mistakes and all that. So I was quite critical of that. And and it is something that we do really well in the UK, which is to criticize a lot. Criticize the NHS.
Yes.
I mean, but in the normal world where we're not clapping for the NHS, we're always saying, oh, what an awful service it provides, or whatever it is, right?
Yep.
So then you sat back suddenly, and I'll tell you what triggered it. I was listening to a podcast. I'm not going to give them a plug, but I was listening to a podcast, and they were interviewing Stephen Hahn, who was the head of the FDA at the time, and he's the one who gave a emergency use authorization to hydroxychloroquine. In that interview, he turned around and said, "Well, we gave the emergency use authorization, and then as soon as we saw the recovery trial data, we rescinded it." And I'm thinking, wait a minute, this is the FDA in the US, right? Probably the most blue chip regulator that there is in terms of how they do their work. And there's a trial being run in the UK called the recovery trial, which is a brilliant trial. And they changed their view on the basis of a trial run in the UK. Now, why aren't we celebrating that more? And it was the recovery trial that gave us dexamethasone, probably the drug with the
Yep.
most evidence behind it for COVID.
Yep.
Then it's given us tocilizumab from Roche. So that triggered this thought process. And then I thought, okay, well, I can add to that the fact that we've got this incredible trial being conducted, which is really only possible because we have a national health service, right? And academics that are able and capable and interested in conducting this kind of research. And then we've got this incredible genomics capability. And about 50% of the genomes of the virus that have been sequenced so far globally, or at least until the time I wrote that last piece a couple of weeks ago, were done in the UK.
I mean, that's incredible. 50% of the genomes globally. So
of the
a lot
virus.
of people, yep. So a lot of people actually relying on the data coming out of Great Britain for new therapeutics, for new modalities, vaccinations for COVID.
I mean, Denmark is doing an incredible job too. So it's not just the UK.
Yep.
But the fact is that we're doing it.
We're a small country. Look, we're 55 or 60 million people. It is actually, we're a small geography, but we're punching well above our weight. And that's what I take from that.
Yeah, so absolutely. And then you have this situation where we have the vaccination process that we have. Now, I was a critic, again, of this decision to make the 12-week interval for the Pfizer vaccine because there's no data backing it. The JCVI's data, and they are the experts, I know that, right? But I analyze the data that's in front of me and I look at it and it doesn't support.
Why do you think the government took the stance of, look, we obviously know that it's now worked and retrospectively it was a good decision, but why do you think they went against the trial data and said, look, we're taking a different course of action?
I think the decision they were taking is that we want to cover as many people with one dose as possible, right? And I don't think we're out of the woods on that yet. It's very easy to do analysis of data after 6 weeks or 5 weeks of having been vaccinated. I really want to see what happens when these people are getting into their 10th, 11th, 12th week. But if you've got a great lockdown at the same time and your cases are falling like a stone, then actually those two work together. But if it was a country like the United States who went to do a one-dose strategy and the next one in 4 months, I think that would be quite dangerous.
Have you seen anything about the data that shows the vaccines working, or do you think it's more to the lockdown, or is there any? No. Are you able to divide the data and show that effect given previous lockdowns?
Yeah, I mean, we've got a lot of data from Israel. One of the things that I want to make sure that I always get a bit worried because I am a big fan of vaccines, right? But I also don't want to be in a situation where we set people up for being over enthusiastic about things. This constant conversation about blocking transmission, right? Reducing transmission. Yes, the data shows it now. But if, for God's sake, if we weren't blocking transmission to a degree with neutralizing antibodies bursting out of our ears 2 weeks after the second dose of the Pfizer vaccine, then when are you going to be able to block them? But the key is, do I have that same effect in 6 months' time as my neutralizing antibodies potentially, we don't know the answer, are diminishing and coming down? That's the key. But in terms of the data that we've seen out of the UK, especially for the AstraZeneca vaccine, the 12-week interim seems to be a lot more effective after 12 weeks than after 6 weeks or less than 6 weeks.
Yep.
So I want to see the same data for Pfizer.
Yep. The Kate Bingham came under a lot of criticism, and she's kind of one of our own from the biotech sector. So I was sort of looking on it, following the story, very interestingly. But I know Kate through various investment circles and companies we've been involved in. She's ferocious, and she led obviously the vaccine task force, we all know. The way that she probably, and I'm not on the inside, so I'm not privy to any information, but I can just imagine the way that she probably ferociously went around to all the big pharma companies with analysts behind her as well to say, look, we want an mRNA vaccine, we need that one, and aggressively negotiating the quantities and the dosage and to try and sort the different vaccines. And when you look back at it, she's been incredibly successful, I think, at picking the winners and getting enough of them and getting the doses into the UK. We've seen that how we're ahead of the game. So I think, Kate Bingham, in my opinion, she was the right person to lead that vaccine task force, and she's done an incredible job. And if I had to put the whole vaccine acquisition strategy down to one person, I would put it down to Kate. Would you agree with that? Do you think we picked the right vaccines? Or is there some that we've missed out on? Do you think that we could have gone harder somewhere? What could we have done better there? Or do you think absolutely bang on the money on that scene?
I mean, if you think about, first, I know Kate also from the variety of, for the same kind of reasons that you know her. And I have high regard for her. What happened in the newspapers and all that, I'm not going to get into that. The vaccines that we did take, given the information that we had at the time, was, I think, was a great portfolio, if you think about it. You had the Pfizer BioNTech for an mRNA. You had a little bit from Moderna. You had AstraZeneca for one adenovirus. You have a J&J deal also for another adenovirus. You have Novavax, which is an antigen-based one. You even have Valneva, which is a killed virus that nobody talks about. But I mean, you know, it's a bit slow in terms of coming along and bringing the product forward. Then it's not slow. It's just that they obviously haven't had the same effort behind them in terms of funding, etc., to get their vaccine forward. So they hit just about every modality of vaccination you could hit that was available. So I would say that they did a great job. And let's not forget, one of the interesting things, I don't know if anybody listened to the European Union hearing with the pharma executives last week. And they spent most of the time questioning Pascal Soriot, who's the CEO of AstraZeneca. And, you know, they tried very hard to push him to say that, you know, that he's giving vaccines taking vaccines from the European Union into the UK. But the nugget that he came out with, which was, of course, knowledge to people who knew about the whole thing, is that a Dutch MEP, I think, asked him the question, why are you manufacturing vaccines in Holland and sending them to the UK, etc.? And he said, well, he didn't quite say, let me correct it. He's much more smoother than I will paraphrase what he said. But at the end of the day, the UK invested in manufacturing back in January or February timeframe, before even AstraZeneca got involved with Oxford University. They had already invested in that. They had invested, the UK government, in the Dutch facility that is now primarily supplying the European Union, right? And all the structure, Valneva's manufacturing is backed by the UK government. Novavax was helped to do their trial first in the UK. And I think that's the important part of what to remember. And certainly, one I'm at, there's a question in there with regards to the cases.
Let me just read the question out, just so everyone knows. So it's good to get. So Michael has a question. Are you talking about Carlos's question or Michael? Which one do you want to answer? Michael. So Michael Brown has asked, the recovery trial has been very successful. However, the success was delivered by extreme number of cases in the UK throughout last summer. If the government had followed a COVID zero approach like New Zealand, would the recovery trial may have not been required?
Correct, but I wouldn't say that the recovery trial was required. Somebody had to do it, and I think obviously the place that could do it was the UK. But yes, you're right. I wish we had made decisions. As I said, you know, looking at the rearview mirror, I wish we had made decisions, or the government had made decisions that worked like New Zealand did, that got cases to zero. I would love to be in the pub and partying with my friends. Who wouldn't? When you see videos of what's going on in New Zealand or sometimes in Australia. But the reality is that it is a good point, but somebody had to do the recovery trial. Who would have tested dexamethasone?
I'll go to Carlos's question here, which is in the panel chat. Would love to hear Sam's view on respiratory virus seasonality and the role it has to play in the rise and fall of cases. So that's the first of his two questions.
Right. So I'm wondering, I think from what I understand, and please don't take me for a well-known or knowledgeable virologist or immunologist. From what I understand, it is not yet proven that this is truly a seasonal virus. Respiratory viruses are, but I don't think it's been proven that this is going to be a seasonal virus, or that the reason we're seeing a drop in England is because of seasonality. If that's the case, why are we not seeing a drop in France? Germany's cases were up yesterday and in the following past 7 days. Why are we not seeing that there? So, and also what would have explained the massive rise in the South African cases in the middle of their summer, which is our winter, right? So it doesn't quite add up. I get the feeling, and when I listen to virologists talk about this, I don't think we can get too, I don't think we can get too, we can't count that in our favor, that it's going to be seasonal and therefore we can have summer.
I want to move on a little bit from this and to see what's, we've had a bit of a tailwind in biotech, and I think it's driven, it felt like it was happening pre-COVID, but obviously it's it's much more documented now. And I think it's always been hard so we look at the private companies and the private to public space in particular. I think at the very early stage, I think at the pre-seed seed phase where O2h invests, I think that's pretty much the same as it was pre-pandemic, really. It's still hard to get money into good science at a very early stage. But I think driven by the markets, public markets, we're seeing very high a large amount of inflows into the biotech sector. I think when you get to Series A, B, C, and close to the markets, there's a huge wall of money that hits some of these private companies. But do you think, really on the market, do you think the sentiment is here to stay around biotech? Do you think that people now say, right, if I have £100 to invest, at least 3 of it should be in biotech to see the value of the science and the value that it can support our social and the economic benefits of that? Or do you think it is something that's very much going to come up and then it's going to wash over and we get back to normal? So it's really a question to you around the sentiment that we're feeling behind biotech right now. I mean, I'm sure you are feeling it too.
Yeah, so look, nothing goes up in a straight line. I think that if that's an investing motto that has worked, stood the test of time. So putting aside the gyrations due to trading environments, cheap money, we're dealing with a world of very, very cheap money now, right? Money being pumped into the system from every angle. When you got cheap money, your risk appetite goes up. When your money cost of your capital goes up, then your risk appetite goes down. So, but putting aside all of those gyrations, putting aside the algorithmic driven sell-offs and the odd retail driven massive rises in the market, we have an ETF out there called ARC Genomics that has risen 350%. If I'm not wrong, please don't shoot me if I got that number roughly wrong. I've got it here somewhere. I'm doing a presentation for somebody else. What have I got here? Let's have a look. There we go, 360%. It went from just under $30 in March to $110 in January, right? So 360%, or whatever that calculates to, threefold, right? And it's now fallen 25%. The point is, there has been an enormous wall of money coming into biotech and lots of other sectors too, right? But we're talking about biotech here. So if there is another area like retail, like leisure, like airlines, like the pandemic beaten sectors, then it might be possible that people who are investing can make some more money there for a few months, 6 months, when that. So that's always there. But the reality is this: if people haven't understood the value that biotech can add, and you can't always pre-guess it. If you had talked to somebody 5 years ago, 4 years ago, 3 years ago, to be an investor in to go and invest money and push them to put money into Moderna, right? I think you would have found a lot of people going, no, but mRNA, I mean, really? How's that? That's not going to take off, et cetera, right?
Yep.
So we have to accept that you can't legislate for science. You can't always pre-guess what's going to work, what's not going to work. You have to take a broad portfolio approach. And this is proven to us that you cannot sign off or say no to any science idea. Take for example, Sunil, take the antibody drug conjugates, ADCs.
Yep.
We had Mylotarg 25 years ago, and then things kind of bumped around a little bit. Then eventually Kadcyla comes around, and suddenly now everybody's interested in ADCs because we've solved
genetics. Yeah.
So I think this future of biotech is, to my mind, guaranteed. You just gotta have.
You can never predict how science works out. You can never. But I think the point you made there is a good one. It's always to have a portfolio approach. And I often get people saying, "So, which biotech should I invest into?" Well, the answer is probably all of them, or at least 10 of them. You need to have a portfolio approach to biotech. I just want to quickly move forward from a little bit on sort of the single asset versus platform companies. And we've talked, I can't have a conversation around biotech right now without coming on to SPACs and the public markets and the London and what's going on and the regulatory changes that might happen. But in 30 seconds, can you explain to everybody on the call what a SPAC is?
I think the name tells it, a special purpose acquisition company. So basically, Sunil and I are going to do one tomorrow. We go and raise money from investors. Actually, this gives retail investors an access also. And then we have 2 years to go, and that's usual timeline for these things. 2 years until at the end of 2 years, if you haven't bought anything, all the money goes back to the investors. There's little cost for them. Within that time frame, you go and find a private company or whatever to buy and fold into your SPAC. That's the way it works. It's just a very easy way of finding a good company who's looking for cash, who needs cash to flourish, to put them into your business. The money's already there, the listing is there, you just get going. So it makes life, so what's in it for a private company? Well, it makes life a lot easier than going out there and trying to raise money from the public markets through a full-blown IPO process.
I see a lot of our biotechs in the UK are a single asset, a lot of them, because it's just the way they're funded. There are obviously a lot of platform players as well. There may be a de-risk approach to investing, and maybe more of a platform approach. But a lot of what we do is single asset, single therapeutic. It's a very focused investment. You're investing in one drug, essentially, one drug target, and you hopefully move that forward. That obviously entails risk of failure later on in the clinical trials. There are ways of de-risking that, maybe taking early exits for some of the investors. But I see, and correct me if I'm wrong, and I might be, SPACs could be quite good for a number of these single asset companies where a vehicle with cash could acquire 5 or 10 biotechs into and allow them to continue with their innovation, develop their program, their drug, keep them small so they are lean in that sense, but the SPAC would carry the upside and the risk of all of them together. Could that be a way where we could ignite our public companies into, or our public markets into getting more involved in biotech, which we've been singularly poor at in London?
So then I think for that answer, you will need to get a banker on board here, because I asked my SPAC specialist out in the US, and he said that they usually go for one company, they buy that one company, and then it becomes that company. Now, that company can then go and acquire other ones, but from his understanding, they're not like a VC who go and buy, a private equity firm who go and buy several companies to merge together. That's not apparently the idea of what they're supposed to do. But I don't know.
Great question from Rowan here. Is like post-COVID, do we think that funding will chase the typical things? I mean, we've seen obviously oncology is very rampant in the biotech space. A lot of deals are being done. But do you think it may go after different therapeutic areas, like, for example, antibiotics or antivirals, which have been less attractive from an investor perspective and historically?
Well, Sunil and I both hope that there will be more money for anti-infectives, and for a different reason. And I hope so. But let's, I have a worry that we don't always learn from what we've been going through. But I certainly hope that what needs to happen is that the fundamentals for those businesses need to change. Diagnostics I can't talk about because it's not my area. But for anti-infectives, the reason VCs don't invest in anti-infectives is because it's a long-winded process of development. There's a lot of risk in terms of side effects and toxicity that can knock out your product. And at the end of the day, you can charge a tuppence for it. So there's just the economics don't work. Simple as that. We all know we need
It's
them.
evolving right now. Now it's evolving. We've got the Defense Act, the PASTEUR Act. These things may come through, and it could be a game changer for, I think, for antibiotics. And I think if those, yeah, I mean, the UK government has already passed legislation to support the space and compensate antibiotic producers differently. And I think if the US follows suit, it could be a game changer, in my opinion.
Yeah, well, we just need the public investors and the private VCs to get interested. If there's a reason to invest and you're given opportunity to make money out of it, well, why not?
So Sam and I are co-investors in a few companies. I won't say which, but we have 4 investments that we've done together. As Sam coming in as an angel and me coming in as an angel through my fund or our fund. So Sam's on a board of a company or two with me. Where, so you have experience now of this small biotech private space, and some of the things we're doing together have been really successful. Where do you think some of these early stage biotechs, where do you think the gap is from what you see? I mean, you see both ends of the spectrum in that sense. You've got small private companies that perform great innovation, do good science, have assets that can move forward, clinical trials are happening, and then you see the public markets, the larger money. How do you see some of these smaller biotechs being able to really raise that large capital, get to public market? Is there too big a gap in the UK, or do you think there's a way of bridging that gap?
Yeah, Sunil, I'm not going to, this comment that I make now is not going to be about the companies that we're involved in. It's a general comment about the biotech scene in the UK, which I think is changing and evolving. It's a matter of ambition, I think. I think money is there, maybe not on the UK public market. I don't know, right? I'm not talking about where you raise your money. For good ideas, the money is there. We just have to have the ambition and the audacity to a degree to think that actually we've got a phenomenal asset to go and hire, to buy, right? So Achillean Therapeutics, is it Therapeutics? Just announced that they're listing in the US, $100 million raise, right? So, okay, I would have loved them to have raised money in the UK, but I don't think the public market in the UK has changed that much since I've not been involved in it for the past 10 years. Maybe some, but not massively. So, and there are people on this listening on this call who know more about that than I do, for sure. But if the public perception, market perception has changed in the UK, it's changed tenfold in the US. That's the problem. We're always chasing a constantly evolving and growing wall of money over in the US. And the stigma or the worry that previously probably existed for UK companies listing in the US, which was always a question, why are you coming here and not raising money? I think that's gone. People just look at it, okay, I'm interested in this science and the asset and the people who are running it. Yep, go ahead. So I'm very optimistic about our companies, as long as we have the ability we have the ambition and the lack of worry about where it is that I'm listing. It's a hell of a lot more work if you're going to be listing on NASDAQ than it is on the UK, because of simply the time difference to start with.
Sam, that's a great answer, having that ambition. And I think, when I look at the CEOs of American startup biotechs and UK biotechs, I think we have our strengths and weaknesses on both sides, but Americans, they definitely have that eye for that plan B, C, that ambition for growth, something, they don't get downhearted very easily. They kind of, do you find, because you must interview a lot of these people, do you find that the Americans have greater ambition in their biotechs in general or in their early stage companies? Is that where you're coming from?
Well, I mean, you find management teams who are evangelical about their businesses out there, right? I think the risk appetite at all levels is higher in the US than it is here. So whether it be at our management level, whether it be at our angel investor level, I can't say the VC, but certainly at the public investor level, at all of those levels, I think risk appetite in general, I'm generalizing here, which by definition means there are people who will fall outside of this.
100% agree, yeah. I mean, we have some great biotech entrepreneurs, CEOs in our portfolio and in the broader ecosystem in the UK. So I think it's, it's really working well as well in the UK. Randeep answered one of our questions is we have a banker obviously on the call, and Randeep said it's one company plus SPAC. So that's the answer to my question on that front.
We have a couple of questions on the Q&A.
Okay, let me just get this. I've got the wrong chat open. Okay, here we go. So Ashish Kumar's asked a question here. So there's a strong requirement of a synergy between biotech and specific industry domains like travel, air, rail, entertainment, corporate estate, tourism, etc. To let innovation drive new solutions. What do you think about this?
I don't know. What do you think about it, Sanu?
I don't know. We'll go with someone.
The question, to be honest.
Specifically with proof of concept diagnostics like fast COVID-19 detection, pathogen testing, genetic testing, etc. Well, I think that, I think you answered a little bit of that earlier in terms of the appetite for risk between, moving between one sector and another. So Samir has a question here. What are the reflections on the change in expectations between timelines of R&D post-COVID era and biotech given the AI decentralization? So do you think we can speed up the process of discovering and developing drugs using AI and machine learning, probably which we've been a bit more focused on during in this last 12 months?
Yeah. I mean, I don't think. I think that.
I mean, you must see the cost of developing a drug are astronomical, and the timelines, and you kind of monitor and track that cost. Do you feel there's a greater efficiency in the biotechs compared to the pharma when you compare?
Well, I'm not sure that's the case. I often find actually a little bit of the opposite, that an asset that a biotech company is called phase 2 goes into a licensing deal with a pharma company and they do another phase 2 because it was never done quite to the degree. Let me just answer that question directly. Whether it's AR, machine learning, or what we've learned about the conduct of clinical trials, what you can do with a clinical trial if you've got everybody aligned at the same time. I was listening to who was I listening to? o2h Sahin, from the CEO of BioNTech. He said, when we started this process, we literally had daily calls with the regulator as we were doing it. Now, the problem is you can't do that for every single drug development, right? I mean, you would need a regulator the size of the UK civil service. So that just won't work. But I am completely sure that post this, pharma companies and biotech companies will have found ways of cutting the red tape and the timing with which they can conduct their clinical trials. And also, of course, there's the other impact on the margins, which comes from the lower costs of marketing your products. The digital aspect, I think some companies will love to go back to sales reps driving around the country, but I think they've all learned that they could shave off a 20-30% cost off that and be much more efficient. Yep. So there's a lot that I'm pretty sure there would be a significant element of that coming.
So for my final question, really, to wrap it off, it's been a great discussion. And being as you're a pharmaceutical analyst, what are your picks and why? What's your top 2 picks in the pharma biotech sector and why? Write this down.
You know that I can't. At Bloomberg Intelligence, we are analysts up to exactly that point.
Okay.
We don't know what is a buy or a sell or a hold, but we have companies that have got incredible pipelines, very interesting times, and my primers would highlight to you, and these are not picks, that a company like Sanofi has got some interesting assets in development which create optionality going forward. And I do wonder sometimes whether they're at their recovery time for the company, similar to where AstraZeneca was 4 or 5 years ago. Astra remains a company that I am in awe of in terms of the pipeline and the growth project profile that they have. And it's not just me. You look at consensus, you find those numbers. Now, whether they are a buy or a sell, that's a different conversation. But those are the elements that I'm excited by.
Great. Sam, thank you for your time. It's been a great discussion. Thank you to the audience for asking great questions and participating as well. There will be another ChaiTime. We'll send out another mailer in the next week, maybe, or the week after. Appreciate everyone's time. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Thank you, Sam.
Bye.